And good morning, everyone. Welcome to our weekly pick of the list. And today we are honored to have Bloomsbury. And I am just going to pass that over to them to get started. So go right ahead, Laura, Erica.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Laura Keefe. I know many of you, but for those of you I don't know, I am the Senior Director of Marketing and Publicity for Bloomsbury on the adult side, and my colleague Erica Barmash has my exact same title on the kids side, and she will be taking over after I go through some adult titles. So I'm going to show you a couple of big fall titles that are coming up, and then I'm going to jump right into Winter 21 because, as Eileen just mentioned, the holiday catalog, we're thinking ahead already. So I'm really excited to tell you about some of this stuff. Sorry, remind me, am I screen sharing? Okay. I will do that then right now. My screen sharing is disabled, I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. And I'm down at the bottom, so I'll go back to the top. Thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm Laura, also presenting with Erica. These are our email addresses, but you have them in your chat if you need them. And without further ado, first up is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is Susanna's triumphant return with her second novel ever after her best-selling book, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which came out 15 years ago. This is another fantasy book, equally gorgeous and intricate, luckily a great deal less intimidating in length. This follows the story of a man who goes by Piranesi. He is the only man who lives in the house, and the house is epic and mysterious. Oh God, hold on. But it is vast, and it contains thousands of statues that are all alike from one another, and it has an ocean with tides imprisoned within the house, and Piranesi is the only person who lives there. Once in a while he sees another person called the Other, and the Other comes and gives Piranesi jobs to do and then disappears again, and has him working with him on what they're calling a great and secret knowledge. So it's got a little bit of a mystery. It's a beautiful puzzle box. We've gotten just a ton of great attention for it already. Susanna is going to have a profile in the New Yorker magazine at publication. She'll be interviewed on All Things Considered. We have incredible blurbs from people like Erin Morgenstern and David Mitchell. It's right up the alley of anyone who loves beautiful literary and fantasy novels. So September 15th, please get your orders in. We are offering a 10 copy signed pre-pack for indies. I know Macmillan is very close to selling out, but if you might be able to ping them or me if you still want to try to get an order in for that. So my next then will be American Utopia. This has a publication date of October 13th now, actually. It says September 8th here in the deck, but it has moved. This is from David Byrne from the Talking Heads and many other awesome artistic and musical projects, and artist Myra Coleman. American Utopia is, as you probably know, David Byrne's Broadway musical that was incredibly successful and is currently paused, but will be returning next year at some point. And this book is an illustrated 4-color book based on the lyrics from the book, and David and Myra collaborated very closely. It's beautiful, it's joyful, it's just a little bit of a light at the end, in a dark place right now. So this will be coming out October 13th, and there is an HBO documentary by Spike Lee that's sort of a concert film / documentary, also called American Utopia, coming out at the same time. So we do have signed book plates available for this from David Byrne and Myra Coleman. You can make requests via Macmillan or to me directly. We're happy to fill basically any number of them that you think you could use in your store. Next up, so I also don't, on the galley request grid, you'll see I don't have galleys to request for Piranesi or American Utopia, because unfortunately we are out of those, but now I'm getting into things I have galleys for again. Dancing with the Octopus by Deborah Harding. This is a memoir. It's really incredible. Deborah when she was a teenager in Nebraska in the 70s, was kidnapped one day, thrown into a van and taken from her home, and assaulted and then left to die in a snowstorm. But she survived, and she identified her attacker, and he went to jail. And this is, Deborah was sent back home to a house that was really not equipped to deal with, with the trauma she had just experienced. They just expected her to move on and not talk about it anymore. And her mother was abusive in other ways that, Deborah has overcome a lot in her life, but as an adult, she actually undertook a really extraordinary project where she wanted to go back and meet with the man who attacked her in prison and just try to understand, his life and what had led him to the point that resulted in him abducting her. So it's incredibly beautiful written. It's, right along the lines of things that people who might like The Glass Castle or maybe even Educated, just in how gorgeously it's written. And Deborah has really, reckoned with a lot, and there's heavy subject matter, but she handles it with a very light touch. She actually manages to tell a very beautiful story here. This one comes out September 22nd. Next up, Shelter in Place by David Levitt. You are probably familiar with David Levitt from his many years of publishing and many literary accolades that he has won. He's been a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award and the LA Times Fiction Prize, among other things. He's also incredibly well connected. He teaches at the University of Florida in Gainesville and has incredible connections, including for people who have explored this book, like Justin Torres and Lauren Groff. This is a contemporary novel set exactly in the aftermath of the 2016 election, where a group of liberal elite New Yorkers flees the city to a country house to sort of regroup and try to recover what has, understand what has been happening to them. It's darkly comic. It's very sarcastic, and nobody really escapes skewering in this book. I think there's an architect, 2 book editors, an artist, and it feels sadly like it's not that far in our past. And we've been joking with David that a potential sequel could actually be what these same people would be doing in 2020 instead of 2016. It's a great read, super funny. And the title, he obviously came up with this title long before COVID, and now this phrase has taken on a whole new resonance for many of us. But I think it still feels kind of apt. I do have galleys available for this one. So that gets me out of fall then and into winter. First up I have in winter is The African Lookbook by Catherine McKinley. Catherine is a historian and a collector of art and photography, and this visual history of 100 years of African women is all entirely from her collection. It's totally incredible. Catherine, as a historian, felt that a lot of the times photos that Americans are used to seeing of African women are, very anthropological or sort of making them very other. And what she wanted to do was put together a really big, beautiful visual compendium of photographs from 100 years ago through the present, taken by Africans themselves, snapshots or professional photographers, as well as photographs, by some male Europeans, which have, very different gaze attached to them. So I have a couple of slides here to show you. Other exciting thing about this book is not only is it beautiful and really fascinating, but we have introductions by Jacqueline Woodson and a foreword by Edwidge Danticat. So, some really big name authors lending their weight to this book. Craft by Glenn Adamson. This is an American history. Glenn is an academic, but he has really focused on the area of American craft. And while craft is often these days sort of relegated to a hobby, it is incredibly important in the overall history of America and our identity, down to, a silversmith named Paul Revere and a flag maker named Betsy Ross. But beyond that, Glenn delves a lot into various other cultures' crafts and how they feed into American craft. It's a really gorgeous overview and contextualization of the role that craft has played in American history and development, as well as where we stand with it now. that will be out January 19th. A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. So Bloomsbury has published up until March of this year Sarah on Our Kids List, and she moved over to the adult side with her new series Crescent City, which was a huge bestseller for us and incredibly successful. This book is technically the fourth book in her A Court of Thorns and Roses series, but we are publishing it on the adult list. So Sarah is now across the board with new books and adult author for Bloomsbury, which is so exciting. This book is absolutely amazing. We will not be making any galleys if you have fans in your stores, but I can tell you it completely delivers exactly what a Sarah Maas book should. It follows the main character of the ACOTAR series is Feyre, and this follows Feyre's sister Nesta, who is a fan favorite, in sort of her personal journey and what happens to her after the events of the original series have concluded. So it's a little bit of a spin-off, but it's a really complete story. It is also very steamy in many places. If you have readers who come to your store who love epic fantasy and who love romance, this is like an amazing hybrid of fantasy romance, and it's a thrilling read. It's so much fun. And I highly recommend getting people into this ACOTAR series before we publish this new book in January of next year. My other big book I'm super excited about in the winter season is Outlawed by Anna North. This is a novel. It is a feminist Western. I think we were thinking of it in line of The Crucible meets A Handmaid's Tale, but there's definitely a lot of elements of Upright Women Wanted here as well, if you're familiar with that one. Outlawed takes place in America in 1896, that has ceased to exist. America, after the end of the Civil War, succumbed to a flu epidemic and broke up into various independent territories. So it follows a young woman named Ada, who is an assistant midwife to her mother. And Ada is 17, she's getting married. She feels very pleased about her marriage and her prospects. She loves being a midwife. She loves her husband. But after a year, Ada has been unable to get pregnant, and fertility in women is prized above all things in this society, to the point where women who are unable to conceive are frequently hanged as witches. So Ada flees her home and ends up joining a gang of outlaws called the Hole in the Wall Gang, that is led by a non-binary, charismatic former preacher named the Kid. And the Kid has a plan to make a safe haven for women in Ada's situation who are fleeing violence at their lack of ability, or at the fact that they couldn't get pregnant. And has a very dangerous plan to execute, but Ada needs to decide whether this is something she's willing to take on in order to pursue the rest of her dreams. It's literary but commercial. It's a fabulous read, a feminist, gender-bending Western. What more could you really ask for? I have galleys of this one available now. Please ask me for one. I absolutely want to get as many people to read it as possible. This is How They Tell Me the World Ends by Nicole Perlroth. This is a nonfiction book coming out in February by a...
I'm the owner of...
Oh, yeah? Sorry, thought I heard something. This is How They Tell Me the World Ends by Nicole Perlroth. Nicole is a New York Times reporter who writes on cybercrime specifically. And this is a deep dive, thrilling, reads like a novel, into the black market cybercrime world and the market for these cyber criminals that has actually been created by world governments. Nicole has done some really deep reporting on this. She's met with incredibly shady characters. She tells an absolutely fascinating and terrifying story that not only will have implications for the election this fall, but just, our futures in general. We're going to see a lot of coverage with her with the New York Times on this one. She's really been digging into this beat. So keep an eye out for a lot of media attention for Nicole as we lead up to pub on this one. I will have galleys of that very soon. Zori by Laird Hunt. Laird is a longtime indie favorite, absolutely gorgeous writer. This book is no exception. It follows the life of a quiet and thoughtful woman named Zori through the Great Depression, as she sort of tries to find her place in the world and ends up, you know, returning to her family home in Indiana where she runs a farm. She's briefly a radium girl. She paints clock face styles and makes a lot of friends. She flirts with the idea of marriage, but you know, in the end kind of always comes back to herself. It's absolutely gorgeously written. The cover, I think, is really perfect for it. And as I said, Laird is a big indie favorite. I think this one's going to do incredibly well for him. So please, I'd love to send galleys out of that one. The Mask Falling by Samantha Shannon. This is the 4th book. I know Kit's very excited. In Samantha's Bone Season series. And, you know, Samantha started publishing the Bone Season series quite a number of years ago. There will be 7 books eventually, but she took a little break last year to publish The Priory of the Orange Tree, which was that like big, fat, beautiful orange book with a dragon on the cover. And I think she found a whole new category of fans. And if you had people who loved that book, by all means, give them the Bone Season series because it's incredible and it just keeps getting better. I mean, it's not, Priory was very high fantasy with the dragons and the magic. This is a little bit more urban fantasy, and the people there have like, the powers people have are psychic powers. So there's a lot to dig into. It's a really elaborate world, but it's really good. This is going to continue the adventures of her heroine Paige, and it actually takes the setting out of London, where it had been really based for the first 3 books, into Paris. So she's expanding the world a bit as well. So you see more of like the evil scion and what the Raphaim are up to, and it's good. And the books get better with every new one. I mean, Samantha's imagination is absolutely astounding. There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job. This is exciting. It is the first time that Kikuko Tsumura has been translated into English. She is an award-winning Japanese writer. This is a contemporary novel about a young woman who wants the easiest job possible with as little engagement as she can possibly have in it. And so she works for a temporary agency, and her specifications for jobs are that she have to do no reading, no writing, and as little thinking as possible. She bounces around to a series of increasingly absurd jobs, including one that is she watches a novelist on camera to make sure that he's continuing to do his writing, but she ends up not liking that job because there isn't a really convenient time for her to go to the bathroom. It's really funny. It's like a pretty great contemporary take on, I think, Japanese work life, but I think increasingly that feels like it applies to everyone's work life all around the world. And so, you know, eventually our heroine finds something that satisfies her, but it comes at a little bit of a cost. And finally, Girlhood by Melissa Phoebos. Melissa published a memoir called Abandon Me with us a couple years ago that had incredible reviews. Melissa is an absolutely astounding writer, and Girlhood is her exploration of the way American society sets up, you know, expectations and norms for young girls, and how girls process all of that, all through sort of the lens of her own experience. And so it has Melissa's signature gorgeous prose, along with some really trenchant and incredible observations about girlhood and American life. And I have galleys of that available as well. So that is it for me. And Erica, I can keep sharing, and you can just say next when you want me to switch.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Erica. And I'm really excited to present to you guys today. Like Laura, I'm gonna start with some fall books and then segue into winter. Also, for those of you who attended Children's Institute, I'm sorry. There's gonna be some overlap, but I'll try to think of new factoids for you to make it a little interesting. So first up, we have Rever the Speedway Squirrel. This is the middle grade debut of Sherry Dusky Rinker, who you probably know as the author of the mega best-selling Goodnight construction site. Here, Sherry provides something for kids who have grown up out of the construction site books, but are still obsessed with vehicles and anything that moves. Rever is a typical squirrel in a lot of ways, except for one. He loves watching the events at the racetrack that his home tree is next to. And while his siblings are getting ready to leave the nest and are dreaming of nothing more than finding nuts all day, Rever has a different dream. He wants to get into that track and drive a race car himself. This is a really cute, really funny book with a sweet message about achieving your goals even when you don't look like everyone else who's doing the thing you want to do. It's really great for kids who have just moved on from chapter books to novels. And since it's the start of a series, we'll have another Rever book a year later. Spoiler alert, that one, Rever and the team get on a plane. So it's another vehicle or another form of transportation that Rever gets into. We're really excited to have Sherry as part of Bloomsbury and excited for her to be moving on to another age group, and we hope you are too. And I should mention, so these first 3 fall books are on the list for galleys, but if you request it, I'll send you a finished copy because we're out of galleys, but we should have finished copies very soon. Okay, next slide. Next is Never Look Back by Lilian Rivera. This is a new YA contemporary on sale September 1st. And Lilian's 2 previous books were The Education of Margot Sanchez and Dealing in Dreams. We didn't publish them, but they were highly acclaimed, so we're very happy to have her at Bloomsbury. This is the story of Theus and Yuri, 2 teens in the Bronx who are falling in love. Yuri lived through Hurricane Maria back in Puerto Rico, and she's tormented by her memories of that experience. And she also believes that there's a spirit that followed her from the island and that he's evil, he's been sent to claim her, and he's haunting her. Her family thinks it's all in her head. They think she's just traumatized from Hurricane Maria. But she absolutely believes in this evil spirit who she calls Otto. And he keeps pursuing her. And as his pursuit of her intensifies, she and Theus have to fight to stay together and to also stay alive. This story is a retelling of the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, but even if you're not familiar with that myth, you'll still love this book. I really liked that it was a mix of contemporary and magical realism. And I thought that it was really beautiful and really heartfelt. Lilian lives in LA now, but she is originally from the Bronx. So she brings it to life so much in her writing. And I was really drawn to the way she explored trauma and mental health in the context of a teen romance. I thought she did a good job of showing how a partner can be supportive and important to healing, but ultimately the healing has to come for the person themselves, not from their partner. Okay, next slide. Next is The Cat I Never Named, a true story of love, war, and survival. This is a YA memoir debut from Amra Sabak El Reyes. In 1992, Amra was a Muslim teen living in Bihać, Bosnia, and she lived a pretty normal life with her parents and her younger brother. More than anything, she loved learning and loved going to school, and she had already been getting noticed for her really good grades and her high test scores. But tensions were beginning to escalate around her, and soon war came to Bosnia, and everything about her life changed. All of the stores closed, school was canceled. Her family was forced to shelter in a basement with other families as the Serbs bombed their town over and over. It often seemed like the war would never end and like life would never go back to normal. But there were some things that saved Amra and gave her comfort. First, of course, the love of her family. They were very close. But also there was a little stray cat named Matzi. Matzi is the word for cat in Amra's language, so not the most creative name, but still, not a sign of their love of her. The family believed that Matzi had literally saved their lives. There was one incident where her brother was standing on the street and then Matzi came running by, so he chased after her, and then a bomb immediately hit right where he had been standing and killed several of his friends. And there were multiple events like this where someone was saved by some sort of grace because of Matzi. But in addition to whether you believe that she actually knew to save their lives, she also saved their lives by giving them love and giving them hope and letting them experience normalcy and sweetness with her. I read this book early this year and I thought it was so powerful and so profound, but I think it's taken on new meaning to me since the pandemic began. And I think teens who read this now will find a lot to think about and a lot of parallels to their situation. Amra lived through something horrific, something that was caused by hate, but the book doesn't sugarcoat this, and neither does she, but it's also a celebration of humanity and of tolerance and acceptance. And it's a story about moving forward from trauma. So I think it will really, really inspire teens. And I hope you guys check it out. Next up, we have Wolf Boy. This is a little bit lighter. We're getting lighter now. Wolf Boy is the debut picture book from Andy Harkness. It's about a problem I have experienced many times in my life, being hangry. If you don't know what that is, that means when you're hungry and it makes you a terror to be around. And while adults definitely get hangry, I think anyone who spent time with a toddler knows that they're really the worst when it comes to being hangry. So parents will love the humor of this book, and I think kids will love seeing Wolf Boy get drooly and growly. If you want to go to the next slide, there's an interior shot. Andy comes from an animation background. He's worked on movies like Moana, and his art is so unique. He does it all out of clay. He sculpts the characters and the backgrounds in an elaborate process where he does the sculpture and then he photographs the sculpture and then he edits that in Photoshop. It's really amazing. If you go to the next slide, you can see another one of the interiors. Yeah. Like I said, this is his debut, and I'm really looking forward to this getting out there and seeing more books come from him in this really fun, funny, relatable style. And the full F&G for this one is on Edelweiss. Okay, next up we have Legacy. Legacy is by the legendary Nikki Grimes, who is a multiple award winner, including the Children's Literature Legacy Award and a Printz Honor Author this year for her memoir, which we did not publish, but which is amazing. In 2017, we published her book, One Last Word, which was this really cool project that paired art from amazing Black artists with poems from the Harlem Renaissance and Nikki's own poems. Nikki uses a method called the golden shovel. If you go to the next slide, you can kind of see their highlighted words on the right side of the poem. So Nikki takes a word or a phrase from an original poem and then builds her own poem around it. So in this case, the highlighted words were the first line of the original poem, and she made them the last word of each line of her new poem. Legacy follows the same format, but this time Nikki is focusing on the women poets of the Harlem Renaissance who often don't get as much acclaim or are not as widely known as their male counterparts. If you go to the next slide, there's another piece of art too. This book is a celebration of Black history and a celebration of Black art in the present. Each piece in the book is done by a different Black artist, like Cosby Cabrera, Shadra Strickland, and many, many more. The full digital galley of this is up on Edelweiss, and that's in color, but we'll also have print galleys, and those will be in black and white, but they'll have a few color spreads. Okay, next up, we have a middle grade novel in verse from Ellen Hagen. We don't have a cover yet, but we should very, very soon. This is Ellen's solo debut. Her first book was Watch Us Rise, which she wrote with her good friend Renee Watson. And that book was a novel, but the text contained poems written by each of the two characters, and we really, really loved Ellen's poems. So we're so glad to have a full novel in verse here. This book follows a girl named Beatrice during the summer before 7th grade as she struggles with all of the ups and downs that go along with that, with friendships and puberty and questions of identity. She's asking herself questions like, who am I and who am I going to be as I grow older? I think this book's really special for a few reasons. One is the Southern setting. Ellen grew up in Kentucky and still lives there part of the year, so she really brings it to life. And I also thought it really highlights the importance of family and in particular grandparent relationships. Bea is really close with her grandma. But I think the most special thing about it is the honesty and the frankness that Ellen approaches these topics with. I think she's such a wonderful writer, and I'm so happy to have her as a solo author now. And we'll have both digital and print galleys of this available. Okay, next one. So next is These Unlucky Stars. This is the new middle grade novel from Jillian McDunn. I am such a huge fan of Jillian, and I know so many booksellers are as well. Her first book, Caterpillar Summer, was an Indies Introduced pick and an Indie Next pick. And her most recent book that just came out, The Queen Bee and Me, was just such a perfect distillation of what it's like to be a 6th grade girl. Like, it gave me very weird feelings in my stomach because of how accurate it was. So this book is the story of a really unexpected friendship that changes a girl named Annie forever. Annie has always felt like the odd one out everywhere she goes, including in her own family. She has a really hard time making friends, and she's kind of a loner at school. But she gets involved in this neighborhood prank of like the classic like ding dong ditch prank where you ring someone's doorbell. But she gets caught, and she ends up through, various things that happen, having to spend time with the woman who lives in the house, sort of as like her punishment. She's an older neighbor. Her name is Gloria, and she's kind of a loner herself. And of course, this turns out not to be much of a punishment at all, because through this friendship, Annie starts to learn more about how to open up, how to relate to people who are different than you, and how to be a friend. What I really love about Jillian's books is that they're about kids who are always trying to be good, but don't always succeed, and who need to redefine what good might actually mean to them, and who learn that it doesn't mean the same thing to every person. I think her books really encourage kids to embrace all aspects of themselves, especially the things about them that make them different. And I think that's so needed. Okay, next slide. Next, we have A Vow So Bold and Deadly by Bridget Kemmerer. Can't say too much about it. Can't give any spoilers, but this is the third book in the best-selling Cursebreaker series. This book is narrated by all 4 of the main characters. So the first book was narrated by 2 characters, the second book was narrated by 2 characters, and then now this is all 4. If you have read the second book, you'll know that there are some really big events that happen at the end of it that need to be reckoned with here. Fans are already on the edge of their seats waiting for this one. I know it's going to be big. I haven't read it yet. We just got the full manuscript, but our marketing manager, Lily, who some of you might know, took it home and read it immediately the first night, like stayed up till like 2 a.m. reading it because she could not wait. And now she's absolutely desperate for the rest of us to read it because she has nobody to talk to about it except Bridget, the author. So I just think this is, like I said, this is going to be so big. We're so excited about it. And I did want to also tease to the fact that if you have a lot of fans of Bridget at your stores, we will have a new series from her called Defy the Night starting in fall 2021. So this will be in January, then the new one will be in September. So her fans will have to wait less than a year after this book for more from her, which I think is great. Okay, next one. So next is the new YA novel from Renee Watson, Love is a Revolution. I'm sure everyone knows Renee as the Newbery Honor and Coretta Scott King Award-winning author of books like Piecing Me Together, Some Places More Than Others, and the one that just came out, Ways to Make Sunshine. But it's actually been a while since we had a new solo YA novel from her. It's actually been since Piecing Me Together, and I'm so, so excited for this. This is a little bit of a new direction for Renee because it has a romance at its core. But as with all of Renee's books, it's really about self-love and self-discovery. It's about a girl named Nala who meets a boy named Ty. Ty is an activist, and so as they're talking and flirting, Nala pretends to be one too. She doesn't mean to lie, but she just gets caught up in it. But of course, as they start falling in love, her lies catch up with her. But she also starts to discover things about herself, like why she lied and about who she is. The love in the title, that's the revolution here, is self-love. And I think this book follows so well from Piecing Me Together, which also explored why self-love can be so difficult for teen girls and why society makes it especially difficult for both Black girls and plus-size girls. Like all of Renee's books, this book is both joyful and important, and I really hope you guys read it. I have definitely, some of you I know have already sent me galley requests, so as soon as we have them, I promise they'll go out. And the cover is almost done. I can't wait for everybody to see it, but I can promise that it features a Black plus-size girl front and center, big, and it's amazing, and I know everyone's gonna love it when they see it. I did see someone had a question about if galleys will be available for Vow So Bold and Deadly, and the answer is yes, but they're going to be a little on the late side, so we probably won't have them till October. And we're actually doing a pretty limited run of galleys just for independent booksellers and media, and a few giveaways for our Cursebreaker Street team, but we're going to limit a lot of the ones we send out to influencers just to encourage purchases. Okay, next slide. Next up, we have the second novel from Phil Stamper, whose The Gravity of Us was a top 10 indie next pick this year and got so much love from booksellers. It was such a pleasure to play a part in launching Phil's career, and I'm so excited that we have another book from him. This one follows Marty, who's moved to London from his very small, very conservative town in the US. He's so excited to start a new life, a life where he's no longer the closeted, shy kid who slips under the radar, and where he's free to explore himself without his parents' disapproval. He's 18 years old, so he's just ended high school. Things start off really well for him. He makes new friends, he gets a boyfriend, he starts traveling around Europe. It's every kid's dream. But despite all of this fun, he feels worse and worse. And He's homesick. His anxiety is getting out of control. And he left the place where he lived for a place that would feel more like a home. But now he's starting to wonder if any place will ever really feel that way. The thing that I love most about Phil's writing is that he balances these fun, sweet romances with this really deep exploration of mental health issues. And I think it really shows what mental health struggles are like for a lot of kids, that it's not always an all-consuming thing, but it's something that's a part of your life. But I think it shows that everyone needs to get help, and everyone needs to feel safe, and everyone deserves to have a place that they feel like is home. If you love Gravity of Us, you'll love this one. And if you haven't checked out Phil's writing yet, I really, really encourage you to, and we will definitely have galleys of this one. Okay, next slide. Okay, so next is the debut YA novel from Stephen Salvatore. Can't Take That Away is about Carrie Parker, who wants to be just as famous as Mariah Carey, Beyonce, and Lady Gaga. But there's only one problem, and that's that the world sees Carrie as a guy, not a diva on the rise. Carrie has the support of their two best friends and a wonderful teacher at their school, though. And they're inspired to try out for the lead in the school musical, the female lead in Wicked, and they get it, and it's amazing. But there's a homophobic teacher and a school bully who are determined to put an end to this non-traditional casting. Carrie refuses to be silenced, though, and begins to rally the school to support them, and it's just so powerful and so uplifting and so wonderful to read. I thought this book was so cool. Carrie's voice is so unique and in your face and fun. And I also love that this is a story about student activism, but I also think we need more books about the full LGBTQ plus spectrum. And this book about a genderqueer person fills a space where I think more books are definitely needed. In the book, Carrie changes pronouns depending on how they are feeling at the time. So each chapter is labeled with the pronoun Carrie is using in that moment. Stephen is really just such a remarkable new voice. He's already been promoting the book so actively on social media and making so many connections. And I'm just so excited to introduce them to the YA world. And that's it. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you, everyone.
Does anyone have any other questions or any comments in the chat? Do we have anything else? All right. Thanks,
Nice
everyone,
to
for
see you
being
all.
here. Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care.
Bye.